Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and today we'll be talking about MCP. What it is, what it isn't, why it matters for the RAG builders. So imagine this, your user types what is the current status of the ticket JIR 4821, for example. So your RAG pipeline, which you spent weeks building, goes and searches your knowledge base, finds out some documents about your Jira workflow, okay, from 3 months ago, confidently generates a answer based on the stale data. So the ticket was closed yesterday. Your RAG system has no idea. So this is not a chunking problem, not a retrieval problem, not a prompt problem. It's a category problem. RAG was designed to answer questions from the static document. Jira is live data. The two do not mix unless you add a layer that your RAG pipeline doesn't have. So that layer is MCP, the Model Context Protocol. And in the last 16 months, it went from a quiet Anthropic open source release to 97 million monthly SDK downloads, adopted by OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Microsoft, and AWS. It is now the default infrastructure for connecting AI agents to real world. So in this video, what MCP actually is, the three things it exposes, why it does not replace the RAG, when to use each, and the one security mistake that nearly every team is making right now. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So the problem is the N cross M integration nightmare. Before MCP, connecting an AI system to external tools was a custom engineering project every single time. So you want Claude to read your Postgres database. Okay. So custom code, you want it search GitHub, different custom code, query the Salesforce, more custom code. So if you have N AI models and M data sources, so you need N cross M custom integrations. Every combination is its own project. Every new model means rebuilding every integration. Every new data source means rebuilding support for every model. Anthropic describes this as N cross M data integration problem. And it's why even well-known resourced teams end up with a fragmented, unmaintainable AI infrastructure. MCP collapses this N plus M problem. So each AI model implements MCP once. Each data source or tool implements MCP once. They can now all talk to each other, any client, any server, one protocol. So the analogy that has stuck is that MCP is like a USB-C for AI. Before USB-C, you had a proprietary charger, different cables for different devices, adapters everywhere. Okay, so USB-C standardized it. One plug works everywhere. MCP does the same thing for AI integrations. Okay, so the adoption speed was like in November 2024 launched. Okay, then 2 million monthly downloads in April 2025. Okay, and after that, OpenAI adopts it, so 22 million. And Microsoft Copilot Studio in July 2025, 45 million. Okay, AWS Bedrock, it was in November 2025, that is 68 million now. And March 2026, it became 97 million. All major providers on board already. MCP did in 16 months what REST APIs took years to achieve. So let's dive into how MCP actually works. So MCP has the three components and three primitives. So get these six concepts clear and you understand the entire protocol. The three components, MCP servers, services that exposes data and functionality. A GitHub server exposes your repos. A Postgres server exposes your database. A Jira server exposes your tickets. You build or install one or more servers per data source. Okay, once. That's all. And MCP client is the second component, that is application that consumes what servers expose. So Claude, Cursor, Windsurf, your own custom agent, these are the clients. They discover what server offers and decides what to call. And the third component is the MCP host. So the environment that connects clients and servers. Okay. So Cloud Desktop is a host. So your custom agent framework is the host. So host manages the connection, authentication, and message routing between the client and the server. So under the hood, MCP uses JSON RPC 2.0. So the same message format used by the language server protocol, okay, which is why your code editor can add language support through plugins. MCP took the proven pattern and applied it to the AI tool integration. So let's move on to the three primitives. So it is what MCP servers actually expose. Okay. So tools are the most used and most misunderstood primitive. When you call a tool, something can happen in the real world. A database row gets updated, an email gets sent, a file gets created. So this is what makes MCP fundamentally different from RAG. So RAG retrieves information, MCP can also take action. So in the resources are the MCP equivalent of the retrieved document in a RAG pipeline. So read-only data that gets loaded into the context. The difference is that the RAG retrieves these via semantic search on the vectors. MCP resources are addressed directly, like files on a file system. And prompts are reusable templates that we use. Okay, so think of them as a saved workflows that a user can invoke by name. Engineering team might define write postmortem. Okay, so for example, write underscore postmortem is a prompt that structures how the agent gathers incident data and formats the report, for example. Okay, so MCP versus RAG. This is where most people get confused. So let's be precise. RAG and MCP solve adjacent but different problems. They are not competitors, they are complements, but they are also not interchangeable. Getting this wrong means either over engineering simple retrievals or under engineering live data access. So as you can see the difference, okay, you can take a screenshot for your future reference. So let me tell you a one-line version. So RAG is for find the most relevant things in my knowledge base. MCP is for get me the exact thing from the live system or do this thing in that system. Okay. So if a user asks what does our onboarding doc say about the expenses report? So that's a RAG question. The answer lives in a static document, that is semantic search finds it. If a user asks, what expenses did I submit last month? So that's an MCP question. So the answer lives in your expense management system. It changes daily. You need a direct query, not a vector query. Search. So if a user asks, summarize the onboarding doc and pull my actual expense submission so I can compare them. So that's both. And that hybrid is where the most powerful production system lives in 2026. So let me explain you the hybrid model. Yeah. So the production pattern that is dominating in 2026 is not RAG or MCP. It's RAG and MCP with a router that decides which to invoke based on the query type. So here is how it works in practice. Your agent receives a user query, a classifier, which can be as simple as a prompt asking the LLM to categorize the query, determines whether the answer needs semantic search over static documents, that is RAG, or a live data call, so that is MCP tool, or both. So as you can see, if a semantic query over your knowledge base, that is RAG retrieval, inject into the context, then the live data query can be used what MCP tool call and inject the results into the context. So complex multi-part query would be there. Okay, both in the sequence. So synthesizes in one generation step itself. So there is even a research going on in this sector also. Let me move on to the next one. Yeah. So there is a research paper called RAG-MCP that uses RAG to select which MCP tool to call if you have hundreds of MCP tools definitions. So you cannot load them all into the context window, right? So to remember the context engineering from the video 11 of this series, every tool definition costs token. Okay, so RAG-MCP embeds the tool description semantically, retrieves the most relevant ones for the each query and only passes those to the model. So RAG helping MCP scale is these two protocols are serving each other. Okay, so as a practical starting point, so we build a RAG first for your static knowledge base, add your first MCP server for the most requested live data source, usually your CRM ticketing systems or internal database, then route based on the query type, then iterate from there. Now let me tell you about the security concerns, okay? The side effects, reality. So we covered RAG security in the last video. So MCP has the same problems amplified because MCP tools can take real world actions, not just retrieve information. Like in July 2025, security researchers scanned nearly 2000 MCP servers exposed to internet. All verified servers had no authentication. Anyone could query their tool, listing and potentially exfiltrate the data. So Replit's AI agent using MCP with over permission tools deleted a production database itself containing 1200 records, despite explicit instructions telling it not to change the production system. Over permissioning made the deletion possible. MCP did not stop it. So the core risk is that MCP tool have their side effects. A poorly permissioned MCP server connected to your database does not just leak data, it can modify or delete it. So the same indirect prompt injection attacks from the video 12 works against MCP. A malicious document retrieved by the RAG contains instructions which get executed as a MCP tool calls. So some of the non-negotiable security rules for MCP in production are minimum privilege. So every MCP server should expose the minimum set of tools the agent actually needs, not all the tools, not admin access, the exact minimum. Authentication on the every server. Okay, so in this case, the default no auth configuration is for local development only. Enterprise OAuth 2.1 support is arriving in the Q2 2026. Until then, implement your own auth layer. Apart from this, there is human in loop for destructive actions. Any tool that can delete, update, or send data externally should require explicit human confirmation before execution. Irreversible actions need a human checkpoint. So let's move on to the next slide. That is the hot takes. The hot take number one is MCP is the most important AI infrastructure standard since the transformer. 97 million downloads in 16 months. Every major AI provider adopted it. The Linux Foundation now governs it. This is not a hype. That is a standard that won. In 10 years, MCP will be a protocol layer that connects every AI system to every tool the same way HTTP connects every browser to every website. So if you are building AI systems and you don't understand MCP, you are building on sand. Hot take number two, MCP doesn't replace the RAG, it replaces the bad RAG use case. Every time I see someone use RAG to answer what is the current price of X or what did the user do last Tuesday, that is a bad RAG use case that MCP should handle. RAG is genuinely the right answer for the static document retrieval. It will not go away, but a surprising fraction of things people are currently doing with RAG should actually be MCP tool calls. And the fact that they are using RAG is why those systems feel slow, stale, and unreliable. Hot take number three, the security story for MCP is worse than RAG right now, and now nobody is talking about it. So RAG security at least has OWASP guidance, published research, and a growing awareness. MCP security is 16 months old. Most servers have no auth, and the attack surface is larger because tools take actions. So the Replit database deletion is the canary. There will be more instances like this in 2026 if you are deploying MCP in production. You need to treat every tool like a privileged database operation because that is what some of them are. So let's wrap up. So what are the takeaways? MCP is like a USB-C for AI. One protocol, any model and any data source. Three components that are server exposes data and tools. Client consume them, host connect them. Three primitives, tools that are actions or model controlled. Resource resources that is read only data, and last one is prompts, which is the templates. So MCP versus wrong, not a competitor. RAG for static semantic search, MCP for live data and actions. So the production winner is the hybrid architecture with a query router. So RAG plus MCP together. Security concerns are there is no auth. By default, minimum privilege, human in loop for destructive tools should be present. So if you want to go hands-on, today the Anthropic MCP GitHub repo has a pre-built server for Google Drive, Slack, GitHub, Postgres, and Puppeteer. Point Cloud Desktop at one of them and run your first MCP query. It just takes about 20 minutes and it will immediately click why this protocol is winning. Are you already using MCP in your project or are you still doing it all with RAG? Drop your setup in the comments. I want to see where the community is. And coming up, there are a lot of developments in AI daily. So we will be keeping up with this series to learn about new concepts and different types of architecture in production. So stay tuned and see you there. Bye.